Hi, welcome to this week's Thought for the Day from Broa Wistley. In 2013, Cambridge University Library acquired an extraordinary biblical manuscript known as Codex Zacyntheus. What makes this book remarkable is that it is a reused manuscript. The parchment originally held a text written around 700 AD, but in the 13th century the writing was washed or scraped away so the material could be used again. Whilst the later medieval text is interesting, it's the hidden, underlying writing that fascinates scholars. Most of it is invisible to the naked eye, yet scientists are now using high-resolution photography, combining ultraviolet, infrared, and visible light to reveal what lies beneath. They're quite literally seeing the Codex Zacyntheus in a new light. Whilst I can't promise any startling revelations, perhaps we might see something of the story of Abraham and Isaac in a new light today. The biblical account of Abraham's attempted sacrifice of Isaac is one of the most dramatic and theologically significant episodes in Genesis. It begins with a shocking command from God. Abraham is told to sacrifice his only son. Abraham prepares in silence, rises early, and sets out on a 3-day journey. The servants are left behind so that father and son can climb the mountain alone. Isaac's innocent questions are met with evasive answers, and soon he finds himself bound and laid upon the wood he has carried. Only at the final moment does God intervene, providing a ram as an alternative sacrifice. This story has raised questions for centuries. What was Abraham thinking? Did God truly command this? Did Abraham struggle with the idea? What did Isaac feel? Did Sarah even know what was happening? And above all, what does this story reveal about God? If the event is simply a test of Abraham's faith, it appears cruel. The reader knows from the beginning that it's a test, but Abraham does not. Perhaps anxiety kept him awake the night before and led to their early start. Perhaps he was sneaking out before Sarah awoke, either to spare her distress or avoid her questioning. However we imagine it, Abraham must have been torn between his love for his son and his devotion to God. Yet he continued, step by agonizing step, until the knife was raised. Whatever we make of his actions, the story portrays a man whose faith was deep enough to place God's call above every other attachment. Christians have long seen in Isaac's near sacrifice as a foreshadowing of what God would later do in offering his own beloved son. The parallels are striking. Abraham is willing to give up his only son. God gives his only son. Abraham and Isaac travel to the region of Moriah. Centuries later, Solomon builds the temple on Mount Moriah, Jerusalem, the place where Jesus would be crucified. Abraham's ram becomes a symbol of the later sacrificial system and ultimately of Christ, the Lamb of God. Yet there is a crucial difference. Abraham believes he must sacrifice his son because he thought God required it. But in the death of Jesus, there's no external deity demanding a price. The mystery of the Trinity means that God himself is intimately involved in the self-giving of the cross. Jesus does not die to satisfy the whims of a cruel God. The Father and the Son act together in love. Far from being cosmic child abuse, the cross is an ultimate expression of divine self-sacrifice. What Abraham began, Jesus completed, a sacrifice that ends all sacrifices. But perhaps the story of Abraham and Isaac can be understood in another way. I don't believe that God commanded Abraham to kill his son. The cultural background suggests something different. Ancient texts from Phoenicia and North Africa describe child sacrifice as a ritual intended to secure fertility and blessing. Abraham would have known of such practices. It's therefore unsurprising that he might assume that offering Isaac was necessary to fulfill God's promise that his descendants would become exceedingly numerous. The logic, tragic and twisted, was that the death of one child could guarantee the future of many. The idea, then, may not have come from God at all, but from Abraham's own limited understanding, shaped by the culture around him. When God intervenes to stop the sacrifice and provides a ram instead, Abraham experiences a moment of revelation. At that time, there was no established tradition of substituting an animal for a human life. The idea of an alternative sacrifice was completely new. It would later become a defining feature of Israel's worship, distinguishing it from surrounding cultures that continued to practice child sacrifice. Recognizing the ram as God's provision required a leap of insight. Someone with less faith might have dismissed it as coincidence, but Abraham sees God's hand in it, a ram instead of a child, a God who provides rather than demands, a God who breaks the cycle of fear and violence of child sacrifice. Perhaps that's why Abraham names the place, "The Lord will provide." The story invites us to look again, to question assumptions we may have inherited about God, faith, and sacrifice. It challenges the idea that God requires suffering to be appeased. It reveals a God who interrupts violence, who provides a way out, who transforms human misunderstanding into deeper truth. It invites us to trust in God even when we don't understand. For Christians, this story ultimately points to the cross, where God provides not a ram, but himself. In the death and resurrection of Jesus, God offers everything necessary for life, hope, and salvation. The cross is not the continuation of a demand for sacrifice, but the end of it. It's God's definitive declaration that he provides. May we share Abraham's insight and strength of faith so that we too may see the fullness of God's provision in the new light of that glorious event. Thank you for listening. God bless you. See you next time. Bye.